What if Ruby was raised by the Grimm? Part 1. We start this with the female Grimm wolf that had picked up Ruby, take it to her pact. As she carries Ruby, she's just making happy baby noises while the wolf is carrying her towards the pact. As she arrives at the pact, a lot of the Grimm wolves are, eyeing Ruby, but don't dare do anything due to the glare of the wolf carrying Ruby. As the wolf takes it towards, the Grimm wolf cubs, as she sets her down next to them. As the Grimm wolf cubs are confused and all that, as the female Grimm just simply lays next to Ruby and takes care of her, looks after her. As she looks at the pact and giving them a glare, telling them, "Don't you dare come towards this child or harm the child." As then a large wolf Grimm with a scar between its head stands in front and looks down at the wolf and Ruby. As the Grimm that is looking after Ruby looks up and is a bit confused because this Grimm with the scar is currently with rage at the moment and is about to, strike the other Grimm, is when it focuses its attention towards Ruby, who had made a sound. As it raised its paw towards Ruby, as then when Ruby touched its paw, and she laughed, the Grimm's eyes turned from red to blue, as it has no urge to attack or even harm the child. It's more of an urge to protect. As the Scar Grimm now looks over at the rest, as we find out that this Scar Grimm was the alpha of the pack. As then it makes a huge roar to indicate to all the other Grimm wolves not to harm Ruby. Now, we go about 5-6 years into the future, when Ruby is playing with some of the, Grimm cubs. As she's playing with them in the forest and all that, as they're basically running. I don't know what Grimm eat, per se, so I'm just gonna say to catch fish for Ruby or berries for her, because she is human. So she's playing with the Grimm, as then she notices a fire over the distance. As she looks at the fire, as then the Grimm that was taking care of her shows up and howls. As she looks over at, thankfully, her mother figure. As she goes over, "What is it, Ma?" As she simply just howls again. "The pack is under attack?" As she grabs Ruby by the collar and picks her up, starts running. As they're passing by where their home was, as they see hunters slaughtering the Grimm Ruby was raised by. As we see the pack leader fighting about 3 hunters, and the pack leader is pretty big. As Ruby is watched as all the other Grimm that she had grew up with were being slaughtered. One by one, they were being taken down by the hunters. As she noticed that the Alpha Grimm, which I'm just going to name Scar, was protecting them. As he did a howl to inform that the wolf that was taking care of Ruby to get out of there with her. As she gets out of the area with Ruby and about few wolf Grimm cubs, as they go further into the mountains, as Ruby is saddened about all the loss of the Grimm. As they get in towards a cave system that the Grimm were hiding. And we go about a few hours after the attack by the hunters. As they go out and come back to the area where their pack was. As the Grimm had died. As she remembered the amount of Grimm that were there. As she looks up towards, well, her mother. Mom, what do we do now? As her eyes turn back to red with hatred. As Ruby looks over at him. I know you're angry. I'm angry too, Mom. But we are not strong enough to face them. The best we can do at the moment is this. As she is contemplating, as she starts to, make like little mounds out of dirt, which confuses the Grimm cubs and, well, her Grimm mother. As she makes like piles of dirt and put sticks on them to like make a grave. As this confused the Grimm that were there. As she says, don't worry, we'll avenge you. As she says that, as Ruby has a lot of anger now, but she is about in too sad of a mood to let it out. As she goes to sleep. And she sleeps with the Grimm cubs. And her Grimm mother has to stay awake as she's the only, adult in the pack that survived. As we skip a few years when Ruby is about the same in canon. As she had collected and made a weapon, the same weapon as in canon, by the way. As she's next with the now adult Grimm cubs, so adult Wolf Grimm. As they're near a small village. As she looks at, her companions. So what should we do, Mother? As she looks over at her Wolf Grimm mother that has grown to a large size. As she's taller than all the other Grimm wolves. As her eyes are red, she has these red markings. As then she makes a howl that is echoed through the night. We attack the village? As she looks at Ruby. As she nods in understanding. They shall pay. All hunters shall pay. No one attacks us without vengeance. As she then points her scythe towards the, small village. Let's take our revenge. As the Grimm wolves start making their way towards the village. As Ruby gets on the back of her mother. Let's go. As she rides, her mother as they're heading down towards the village. Where basically her siblings are causing all type of havoc. Destroying homes, attacking civilians. As she arrives, a few hunters are attacking, the Grimm. One of them has a sword, one has an arrow. As she noticed one of her siblings has an injured paw and an arrow is coming straight towards its head, she quickly jumps off her mother and simply slices the arrow in half, confusing the hunters. What are you doing? That's Grimm. Get away. As she looks at them, as the Grimm start to surround her. This is my family, and you shall not take another family member from me. As she points her scythe towards them. As they're confused, as then she pulls the trigger and shoots one straight through the stomach. As the others stand on guard. As the Grimm start attacking them. And one of them didn't notice, the big Grimm behind, which is Ruby's mother, as she just simply steps on one and killing him. and the other two that were there were simply killed off by the grimm. As Ruby approaches the injured one that she shot through the stomach. You hunters and huntresses are surely a pain. You know how many family members I've lost. As he looks up at her. Those are monsters. These monsters are my family. As she simply swings her scythe, decapitating the hunter. Before they start walking away from the village. As she turns her head towards her mother. Mother, were these the persons that killed our pack? As she shakes her head. As then she starts to draw something. As then, it's very unnoticeable, but the same weapon that she has is the one that ended the pack with a few others. So the person with the same weapon killed our pack. As she nods. Very well. Let's keep moving. Maybe he's in the next village. As they start to walk towards the next village. As they stop at a river to take some rest. As Ruby is watching over it. Well, her siblings and all that, as they're playing around. As she smiles. As she pulls out one of the things she had grabbed from one of the hunters. As she then looks at it. Beacon? As it was a car that said Beacon. Maybe this is where we'll find him. As then, her mother then just, destroys the card. Mother, why did you do that? As she says, shakes her head, no. Don't go to Beacon? As she shakes her head, yes. Why? As she just glares at Ruby. I understand, Mother. If you don't want me to go, I won't go. But where shall we go now? The next village is about a day's walk from here. As she looks over at all of her, the cub grimm she had raised, and looks back at Ruby. You want me to look after them? You're here with us, Mother. I'll do as you ask. As she then just starts to pat her mother's head. Everything will be fine. I shall not let any other grimm dear to me perish. As she looks at Ruby with a trusting gaze. Now let's head to the next village, Mother. It's about a day's trip. We should get moving. As she howls to let the other grimm wolves know it's time to move. As Ruby gets on her mother's back. As they start to ride off. As we go to Beacon, Ozpin, who's been getting reports about grimm attacks villages nearby being destroyed. Now, they can't really do anything, or he can't really do anything as they've been destroyed before backup could arrive. And no one had seen Ruby, but the cases had all been the same. Been destroyed by Wolf Grimm. Been destroyed by Wolf Grimm. So a constant repeat. Which Ozpin is starting to piece together the clues that it's a coordinated attack. It seems like someone's attacking villages. Maybe they're in search of something. Maybe I should inform the other hunters and huntresses to know. But for the time being, I can't really do anything about it, since this is a school. She can't really send out hunters on an unknown mission, because it's not like they stay in one place. They're constantly traveling. As she's just We go back to Ruby, she's just on her mother's back as they had destroyed another village. The hunter is lying, well, dead. Good work, siblings. We've now taken another village. As she looks over at someone who's pointing like a sniper, as she turns into rose petals and quickly gets behind her. As she's about to shoot at, well, her mother, as she has her finger on the trigger, as then she feels a piece of metal in the back of her head. As she looks back and sees Ruby, as then she fires, killing her. You shall not harm any of us. As then she grabs, well, her goggles. As she just puts it in her bag. That's at least, what, 5 hunters' items I've collected? As she jumps down and lands on one of her siblings. As her sibling then just takes her back to their mother. As they stand in front of her mother, as the village is on fire. Her siblings are hunting down the rest of the survivors. As she gets off, as she goes to her mother. So, what should we do next? We've hunted at least 3 villages now. As her mother looks at her with rage still in her eyes. We cannot go after the big cities, Mother. We are not prepared. As she just simply looks at Ruby. She noticed that she had a slight scratch on her, well, shoulder. As she comes over and licks it. I'm fine, Mother. As then, well, her mother, Grimm, puts a paw on her as she's now pinned to the ground, as she just lays there. Mom, this is no time for a rest. As she then just glares at Ruby, who looks like she hadn't slept in days. Fine, Mother. As Ruby just simply falls asleep, as she moves her paw away from Ruby. As soon as the, well, fire dies down and the survivors had been killed by the Grimm sibling wolves, they simply came back and rested there. And that is the end of part 1 What if Ruby was raised by the Grimm?